Hi friends, welcome to Practice Notes and welcome to our second part of the first episode of Secrets of Practice, where Ariel Horowitz talks about how she manages performance anxiety. Today, Ariel is going to talk about her journey with nerves and how she currently practices in nerves before performance. I learned so much from Ariel, and I want to say a huge thank you to her, especially for her being our first guest on our series. I hope you enjoy, and if you want to see more practice tips, you can follow us on our website, www.practicenotes.us, and on Instagram and Facebook at project.practicenotes. If you want to follow Ariel, her website is arielhorowitzviolin.com, and her Instagram and Facebook are at Ariel Horowitz Violin. Thank you so much for watching and enjoy.
It's audition season coming up for everybody, and for anyone who is either a student or a teacher. This is a really unprecedented audition season. Teachers are learning just as much as students about all of this right now, and we're all in this new space together. So I think it's important up front to just acknowledge the anxieties that brings up. We have COVID anxiety, we have all of the pandemic anxiety. We're gonna just take it, we're gonna put it over here for a second, because we try to talk about performance anxiety on top of COVID anxiety. I feel like we're all just gonna need to go take a 7-hour nap. Whether you're, recording an audition, whether you're showing up to a live Zoom audition, or whether, at some point there will be auditions that we can attend in person, kind of the way that we're used to. I attended the Menuhin competition in 2016. Spring of 2016. I went to a master class with Pamela Frank, and I wasn't playing, I was just in the audience. This person played and it was beautiful, and Pamela Frank came up and she was like, "Were you nervous?" And I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "Good, nerves are good." And I was like, "Nerves are good? Like, this is crazy." Because I just had never thought about nerves as being good. I spent so much time trying to figure out every possible way to not get nervous that I actually became nervous about getting nervous. Again, I would also just like to put out a disclaimer that I am a violinist and I have no qualifications for anything I'm saying, in terms of there are therapists and psychologists who have studied this stuff for their whole lives. I'm just saying what works for me and what works for my students. What I try to do now, and what I try to have my students do, is just go through this sort of meditative practice of just sitting with yourself and being like, it's okay to get nervous, and I welcome being nervous. Because, and exactly like what Pamela Frank ended up saying in the masterclass, if you're nervous, it means that you care. And the nerves show up because you're invested in doing a really, really good job, and you're invested in showing what you have to say to the best of your ability. It's an ongoing practice of, okay, I'm going to welcome the nerves. They're here to remind me that everything that's about to happen is something that I really care about. And they're going to actually go with me on stage and be my friend to help me get through what I'm about to do. Because essentially, if we break it down biologically, it's adrenaline, right? It's adrenaline response.
Right.
And we couldn't survive what we're doing without a little bit of adrenaline. So yes, psychologically it helps, but also it helps physically. Think about how could you get through Dvorak cello concerto without a little bit of adrenaline, right?
There's no
you
way.
need it. Exactly. So right, there's no, you'd be sitting there just chilling out. Visualizing opening the door, and manifesting what your nerves look like in a physical sense, and seeing them walk in can help. When I give my nerves physical characteristics, they're always gray, and it's like gray tornado smoke with cartoon legs. That sounds so silly, yeah. But you know what I mean? Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, it's not so scary. It's a little cartoon fuzzy, cartoon fuzzy man. Yeah, and I'm just gonna open the door and he's gonna come in and we're gonna go on stage together and it's gonna be great. Or go on live Zoom audition together and it's gonna be great. As far as what happens way back, I think one of the things that makes us really nervous, one of the reasons that we get nervous, is because we want things to go exactly the way that we practice them. Live music doesn't work that way, and I think that's cool. I didn't always. I used to avoid mistakes like the plague. I think one of the ways to actually practice preparing for the inevitable spontaneity of what happens on stage is actually like choosing to build in practicing where you intentionally play different ways than you have. One of the like things that I try to do with my students is practicing interpretations that you don't believe in intentionally, or practicing things going wrong. So I'll start with the interpretive side of things. First thing that comes to mind right now is like the start of the slow movement of the Glazunov concerto. So, okay, my normal-ish interpretation would be something fairly lush, fairly romantic, be something like so just, little phrase. Now I want to practice for that going differently than I want it to. So let's say I'm a little bit nervous, so I'm not going to be able to be as in the string as I just was, or I might make too much crescendo right away. So now I'm going to like actually name that in a positive way. So it's going to be a more like breathless interpretation, right? So same phrase, a little different. Preparing for nerves. So little, not, different notes or anything, but just like slightly different enough. And I gave it a different name so that I, maybe I have a preference for my first interpretation, but my second interpretation is still okay, right? Yes. So I'm saying to myself, like, if that happens, I'm good with it. I'm welcoming it. It's maybe not exactly what I practice, maybe not exactly what my teacher would like, but it's okay. Like, we're good with that. Let's say I wanted it to be much more introverted. Okay. Let's say I'm really nervous now. Okay. So this is like super, super, super shy. Let's say everything in the first movement went wrong. I am arriving at the second movement and like I'm really jittery and I need to like calm myself down. So we have a different interpretation. And then if I was in a lesson with a student, I would just start coming up with ridiculous things because I feel like when we laugh, we learn better. So maybe I'd be like, okay, now we're going to do a hyper version. That sounds really bad. We're going to do a version now that's, this version has a broken leg. So I don't know what happened. You forgot to count. You were so nervous that you were like, what is 4? I can't count to 4 anymore. It happens. We've all been there. Having fun with things being different than you want them to be. Because I think we all say like, I'm going to be okay with whatever happens. But if we don't actually get our ears used to hearing a variety of interpretations of each little section, it's very surprising. Our brains don't like surprises. Our brains are like, okay, ma'am, this is not what we practiced. Like, we're going to go into, code red. This is bad. Whereas like when you practice also the added benefit of this is that maybe you'll find something you like better than what you thought was the grand interpretation of your life. You might do something and you're like, ooh, it's kind of fun. Like, I like that. Like, yes. Maybe bring it to my teacher, see if they'll give me their blessing for this, funky way. So that's something that I like to do in my practicing and that I try to have. And I think that's something that you can do at all levels too. In your experience, when you're preparing pieces to play or audition with at a high level, are there sections that like you just dread?
Oh, like yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? Like you have those like, oh no sections. Like that's what I call them. It's like you're getting there like, this is super weird, but I like to plan what I think about during those sections of music. So not just like, everyone and their mother will tell you practice slowly, practice in rhythms, do all of the kind of metronome work that you need to do. I second that. I think that's the first step to all of this. But this is for like when you really know what you're doing, but you just can't get over that mental block for like a super spidery section. So probably shouldn't tell this story, but that's okay. I'm going to tell it anyway. It's embarrassing for me, but that's fine. I will embarrass myself for the sake of other people not doing the things that I have done. So back a couple years ago, I really, really, really did not plan my time well. And I was going to go to the Grumio competition. And I found myself, sorry, Ani, please forgive me. I found myself 2.5 weeks before the competition. And I was supposed to play the Izai second sonata, first and fourth movements. I didn't know them. I don't know how I did that. Again, I was already in grad school. Like I should have known better. This was really, really bad planning on my part. And I like read the website again. I was like, oh, the Izai sonata. I was like, it was the worst. It was so bad. I learned from that experience. I have not allowed myself to get into that situation again, but I was like, you know what? I have 2 weeks. It's not 2 days. I can make it happen. Like I can rev it up and, cancel a bunch of stuff and just leave a lot of dirty dishes in the sink and we can just make it happen. Because it was such a quick study. I've since played that piece a lot of other times and like actually properly learned it, like with enough time to feel certain ways about it. But in that time constraint, I had to be so practical about my choices and about how I practiced, because I was like, okay, this has to be memorized and it has to sound okay. Yeah. So those goals were in place. And there were a couple of sections that I just was so nervous about. Like I had written fingerings and done rhythms and done metronome practicing. And I decided in that moment, I was like, okay, I'm going to just plan imagery that's going to work to just get me through these sections of this piece. Mm-hmm. So for one of them, it was like right at the start of the first movement. I think I practiced it a number of times. I had this image of like a bouncing basketball. I don't play basketball. I'm not athletic whatsoever, but I was like, okay, I'm going to like, in my mind, when I get to this spot, there's just going to be the basketball. And I'm going to like imagine myself bouncing the basketball just for the duration of this passage. And I think it was something, at least for me, in terms of like feeling grounded in the rhythm, but also like, I don't know why, but the color like orange is very calming for me. So like seeing the basketball like hitting the imaginary pavement in my mind, just like for whatever reason, I was able to play that passage without messing up, which again, horrible, very basic goal to have, but like, sometimes we're, real life is real life. I think the sillier the image, the better, because again, anything to turn the temperature down emotionally in those moments. The last thing I'll say about all of this is we all end up in life where we're kind of meant to. And I think there's something really comforting in that. And it's usually better and more suited for us than we can imagine.